The church was silent. 500 guests held their breath as she reached for the veil. He was smiling, the kind of smile that comes once in a lifetime when you think you've finally found everything you've been searching for. And then she lifted it. His smile vanished, his face drained of color. He staggered backward, clutching his chest, and before anyone could move, before anyone could scream, he collapsed, right there at the altar. The bride everyone had rejected had just brought the most powerful man in the room to his knees, and nobody knew why. Who was she? What secret could be so devastating that it would make a billionaire collapse in front of hundreds of people on what was supposed to be the happiest day of his life? And why would a woman who had been rejected by everyone, scorned by society, humiliated by strangers, agree to marry a man like him in the first place? This isn't just a love story. This is a story about buried secrets, about the lies families tell to protect themselves, and about what happens when the past finally catches up. By the end of this, you're going to question everything you think you know about love, about family, and about the lengths people will go to for revenge, or maybe, just maybe, for closure. Because when paramedics rushed into that chapel and tried to revive him, when the bride disappeared into the crowd and vanished without a trace, nobody understood that this wedding wasn't a beginning. It was an ending. An ending that had been written decades before either of them ever said, "I do." Before we go any further, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Now, let's talk about Jonathan Grant. If you've ever used a smartphone, streamed a movie, or ordered something online, you've probably used one of his platforms without even knowing it. By the age of 32, Jonathan had built an empire. He started coding in his parents' basement in Ohio when he was 15, dropped out of college at 19, and by 25, he'd sold his first company for $200 million. But money didn't make him happy. Fame didn't either. He was lonely. The kind of lonely that comes when you realize everyone around you wants something from you, and nobody actually sees you. His friends were investors. His girlfriends were models who posted him on social media and left when the headlines dried up. His family called only when they needed money. So Jonathan did what a lot of powerful men do when they're empty inside. He disappeared. He bought a quiet property in a small town in North Carolina, far from Silicon Valley, far from the press, and he started going to a local church on Sundays, not because he was religious, but because it was the only place people didn't recognize him. And that's where he met her, Emma Rose Carter. She wasn't beautiful in the way magazines define it. She didn't have perfect skin or a perfect smile. She was 30 years old, worked 2 jobs, one cleaning houses and the other stocking shelves at a grocery store, and she lived in a small apartment with her aging mother who had diabetes and couldn't work anymore. Emma had been engaged once, 4 years earlier, to a guy named Michael, who left her 3 weeks before the wedding after his mother told him Emma wasn't good enough, that she came from nothing and would drag him down. After that, Emma stopped trying. She stopped going to parties. She stopped dating. She stopped believing anyone would ever see her as more than the poor girl from the wrong side of town. But Jonathan saw her. Not at first. At first, she was just another face in the congregation. But then one Sunday after the service, he saw her helping an elderly man carry groceries to his car in the rain, and something about the way she smiled, not for recognition, not for applause, just because it was the right thing to do, made him stop and watch. He didn't approach her that day, or the next week. He just watched. And the more he watched, the more he realized she was different. She didn't want anything from anyone. She wasn't performing for the world. She was just surviving. And somehow, that made her the most beautiful person he'd ever seen. 3 months later, Jonathan finally worked up the courage to talk to her. It was after another Sunday service, and she was sitting alone on a bench outside the church, reading a worn paperback novel with a cracked spine. He sat down next to her, hands in his pockets, and said something awkward like, "Is that any good?" She looked up, startled, and for a second he thought she was going to get up and leave. But instead, she laughed. A real laugh. Not polite, not forced, just genuine. And she said, "Honestly, it's terrible. But it was 50 cents at a yard sale, so I'm committed now." That was the beginning. They started talking after church every Sunday, then coffee on Wednesdays, then dinners on Fridays. Jonathan never told her who he was. He introduced himself as John, said he worked in tech, and left it at that. And Emma, bless her heart, didn't Google him. She didn't ask about his money or his house or his car. She asked about his childhood, about his dreams, about what made him sad. And Jonathan, for the first time in his adult life, told the truth. He told her about the loneliness, about the pressure, about how sometimes, late at night, he wondered if any of it mattered. And Emma listened. She didn't try to fix him. She didn't offer advice. She just listened. And that, more than anything, made him fall in love with her. 6 months later, he proposed. Not at a fancy restaurant, not on a beach in the Maldives. In her tiny living room, while her mother was asleep in the next room and the television was playing reruns of a cooking show neither of them were watching. He got down on one knee and said, "I know I'm not perfect. I know I'm awkward, and I work too much, and I don't always say the right thing. But you make me feel like I'm enough, and I don't want to spend another day without you." She said yes. She cried. And for the first time in years, Emma Rose Carter believed that maybe, just maybe, she deserved to be loved. But the moment Jonathan told his family, everything changed. His mother, Diane Grant, was a former socialite who'd spent her entire life climbing the ranks of high society. When Jonathan told her he was marrying a woman who cleaned houses, Diane didn't hide her disgust. She said, "You're going to throw your life away for some nobody? Do you have any idea how this will look?" Jonathan's brother, Marcus, was worse. Marcus had always been jealous of Jonathan's success, and now he saw an opportunity to undermine him. He hired a private investigator to dig into Emma's past, looking for anything he could use to convince Jonathan to call off the wedding. And Jonathan's ex-girlfriend, a woman named Vanessa who dumped him 2 years earlier, but couldn't stand the idea of him being happy with someone else, started spreading rumors online. She posted on social media, insinuating that Emma was a gold digger, that she was using Jonathan for his money, that she was probably lying about everything. The comments section exploded. Strangers who'd never met Emma called her a scammer, a leech, a manipulator. Emma saw the posts. Of course she did. And it broke her. She came to Jonathan one night, tears streaming down her face, and said, "Maybe your family is right. Maybe I'm not good enough for you. Maybe you should find someone who fits your world." But Jonathan took her face in his hands and said, "You are my world, and I don't care what anyone else thinks." So they set a date. They planned a small, private wedding at a historic chapel just outside of town. Jonathan invited only a handful of people, his assistant, a few close friends, and, reluctantly, his family. Emma invited her mother and a few co-workers. That was it. But in the days leading up to the wedding, strange things started happening. Emma received anonymous letters at her apartment. One said, "You don't know who you're marrying." Another said, "He's not who he says he is." And a third, delivered the night before the wedding, said simply, "Run." Emma didn't tell Jonathan about the letters. She told herself they were just jealous strangers trying to sabotage her happiness. But deep down, something felt off. And then there was the private investigator Marcus had hired. His name was Richard Calloway, and he was good at his job. Too good. Richard didn't just dig into Emma's past. He dug into Jonathan's. And what he found made him stop dead in his tracks. He called Marcus and said, "We need to talk. In person. Right now." Marcus met him at a diner 30 miles outside of town. Richard slid a folder across the table. Inside were documents, old birth certificates, hospital records, and a single photograph. Marcus opened the folder, looked at the photograph, and went pale. He said, "Does Jonathan know?" Richard shook his head. "I don't think so. but if he doesn't, he's about to. Marcus stared at the photo for a long time. Then he closed the folder and said, "Don't tell him, not yet. Let the wedding happen. If he finds out afterward, it's his problem." Richard hesitated. "That's a mistake." Marcus leaned forward. "I'm paying you to do what I say, not to give advice." Richard took the money, and he stayed silent. But the truth, as it always does, was about to come out. The morning of the wedding, Emma woke up in her childhood bedroom, sunlight streaming through the thin curtains, and for a moment she let herself believe everything was going to be okay. Her mother knocked softly on the door and came in carrying a cup of tea. She sat on the edge of the bed and said, "You look beautiful, sweetheart." Emma smiled, but her hands were shaking. Her mother noticed. "You nervous?" Emma nodded. "What if I'm making a mistake?" Her mother took her hand. "Do you love him?" "Yes." "Does he love you?" "I think so." "Then that's all that matters." But Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She thought about the letters, about the rumors, about the way Jonathan's family looked at her like she was dirt on their shoes, and she thought about something else, something she hadn't told anyone. A memory from her childhood. A memory she'd buried so deep she'd almost convinced herself it wasn't real, but it was, and it was about to surface. Meanwhile, at the chapel, Jonathan was pacing in a small room off to the side, adjusting his tie for the 10th time. His best man, a college friend named David, tried to calm him down. "Relax, man. You're getting married, not going to war." Jonathan laughed, but it was strained. What if she changes her mind? She won't. What if she realizes she's too good for me? David put a hand on his shoulder. "John, I've known you for 15 years. I've never seen you this happy. That woman loves you, and you love her. That's all that matters." Jonathan nodded, but his chest felt tight. He couldn't explain it, but he had this overwhelming sense that something was about to go terribly wrong. And he was right. At 3 o'clock, the guests began to arrive. Jonathan's mother came in wearing a black dress, which everyone knew was her way of protesting the marriage. Marcus came in late, smirking, whispering something to their cousin that made them both laugh. Vanessa, Jonathan's ex, somehow got an invitation, nobody knew how, and sat in the back row, arms crossed, glaring at the altar. Emma's co-workers sat nervously in their Sunday best, out of place among the wealth and the judgment. And then the music started. The doors at the back of the chapel opened, and Emma appeared. She was wearing a simple white dress, nothing extravagant, nothing designer, just something she'd found at a consignment shop and altered herself. Her mother walked beside her, tears already streaming down her face, and Emma, beneath her veil, was trembling. Jonathan turned and saw her, and his breath caught. She was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. She walked slowly down the aisle, each step feeling like it might be her last, and when she finally reached the altar, Jonathan took her hands and whispered, "You okay?" She nodded, but she wasn't. The officiant began, "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." But Emma wasn't listening. Her heart was pounding, her vision was blurring, and then the officiant said, "You may now lift the veil." Jonathan reached forward, gently lifting the thin fabric, and the moment he saw her face, his entire world shattered. His hands dropped, his face went white. He staggered backward, his legs giving out beneath him, and he collapsed onto the floor. The chapel erupted in chaos. Guests screamed. Jonathan's mother shrieked. David rushed forward, dropping to his knees beside Jonathan, yelling, "Call an ambulance! Somebody call an ambulance!" Emma stood frozen at the altar, her veil still in her hands, staring down at the man she loved convulsing on the floor. She didn't move. She didn't cry. She just stood there, like a statue, while the world fell apart around her. Paramedics arrived within minutes. They checked his pulse, his breathing, loaded him onto a stretcher, and rushed him out of the chapel. And Emma, still in her wedding dress, still holding her veil, walked calmly out the side door and disappeared into the parking lot. Nobody stopped her, nobody followed her, and by the time anyone thought to look for her, she was gone. Jonathan woke up in a hospital room 6 hours later. His head was pounding, his chest ached, and when he opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was his mother sitting in a chair by the window, her arms crossed, her face hard. "What happened?" he croaked. Diane didn't look at him. "You collapsed." "Where's Emma?" Silence. "Mom, where is Emma?" Diane finally turned to him, and her expression was cold. "She left." "What do you mean she left?" "I mean she walked out of the chapel and disappeared. Nobody's seen her since." Jonathan tried to sit up, but pain shot through his chest, and he fell back against the pillow. "I need to find her." "No," Diane said sharply. "You need to stay away from her." "Why? What are you talking about?" Diane stood and walked to the foot of the bed, her hands gripping the metal rail. "Because, Jonathan, that woman is not who you think she is." Jonathan's blood ran cold. "What are you saying?" Diane reached into her purse and pulled out a folder. The same folder Marcus had received from the private investigator. She dropped it on Jonathan's lap. "Read it." Jonathan opened the folder with shaking hands, and what he saw inside made him feel like the floor had dropped out from under him. Inside the folder was a photograph. It was old, faded, taken maybe 30 years ago. It showed a man standing outside a small house, smiling, holding a baby girl in his arms. The man was Jonathan's father, and the baby was Emma. Jonathan stared at the photo, his mind refusing to process what he was seeing. "No," he whispered. Diane's voice was ice. "Your father had an affair, for years, with Emma's mother. Emma is your half-sister." The room spun. Jonathan thought he was going to be sick. "That's not possible." "It's true. The investigator confirmed it. Birth records, DNA, everything." "Does she know?" Diane hesitated. "I don't know, but I think she does." Jonathan's hands were shaking so badly he dropped the folder. Papers scattered across the bed. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" "Because your father made us promise. He said it would destroy the family. He paid Emma's mother to stay quiet, to stay away, and when he died, we thought it was over." "But it's not over," Jonathan said, his voice breaking. "Because I just tried to marry her." Diane didn't respond. She just stood there, staring at him with something that looked almost like pity. And Jonathan, the man who had built empires, who had outsmarted competitors, who had never once in his life felt truly helpless, broke down and sobbed. Meanwhile, Emma was sitting in a motel room on the edge of town, still in her wedding dress, staring at her phone. She had 17 missed calls from Jonathan's assistant, 12 from David, 3 from her mother, and 1 voicemail from Marcus. She played the voicemail. His voice was smug. "Hey, Emma, or should I say, little sister? Yeah. We know. And now Jonathan knows too. So whatever game you were playing, it's over. Stay away from my brother, or I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what you are." Emma deleted the voicemail, and then she opened the drawer of the nightstand and pulled out an envelope. Inside was a letter, handwritten, dated 3 weeks earlier. It was addressed to Jonathan. She had written it the night she received the last anonymous warning, the night she realized she couldn't go through with the wedding without telling him the truth. But she'd been too afraid, too ashamed, and now it was too late. The letter read, "Jonathan, by the time you read this, you'll know who I am. You'll know that I'm your half-sister, and you'll hate me. I don't blame you. I should have told you the moment I realized. But I didn't. Because for the first time in my life, someone saw me, someone loved me, and I was selfish enough to want to keep that, even if it was built on a lie. I didn't plan this. I didn't know who you were when we first met. But when I saw your father's name in an old photo my mother kept, when I pieced it together, I should have walked away. I didn't. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I hope one day you can forgive me. But I understand if you never do. Emma." She folded the letter, placed it back in the envelope, and set it on the nightstand. And then she walked out of the motel, climbed into her car, and drove away. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew she couldn't stay. Jonathan was released from the hospital 2 days later. He didn't go home. He went straight to Emma's apartment, but when he got there, it was empty. Her mother was gone too. The landlord said they'd paid through the end of the month and left no forwarding address. Jonathan stood in the empty living room, staring at the space where her couch used to be, and felt like he was losing his mind. He hired his own investigator. He searched for her for weeks. But Emma had disappeared completely. No social media, no credit card activity, no phone records. It was like she'd never existed. And Jonathan, for the first time in his life, didn't know what to do. He stopped going to the office. He stopped answering calls. He just sat in his house, staring at the walls, replaying every conversation they'd ever had, trying to figure out if any of it had been real. His friends tried to help. David came over with food and beer and said, "You've got to move on, man. This isn't healthy." But Jonathan couldn't move on, because he didn't know what he was mourning. Was he mourning the loss of Emma, the woman he loved? Or was he mourning the loss of the lie, the fantasy he'd built around her? He didn't know, and that not knowing was eating him alive. 3 months later, a package arrived at his door. No return address. Inside was a USB drive. Jonathan plugged it into his laptop and a video file opened. It was Emma. She was sitting in a small, unfamiliar room, her hair pulled back, her face tired but calm, and she spoke directly to the camera. "Hi, Jonathan. I don't know if you'll ever see this. I hope you do. I hope you're okay. I know you probably hate me. I know you probably never want to see me again, and I understand. But I need you to know the truth. I didn't know who you were when we met. I swear. I thought you were just some guy who went to church on Sundays. And by the time I figured it out, by the time I realized you were my father's other son, I was already in love with you. And I know how horrible that sounds. I know how wrong it is. But I didn't know how to walk away. I thought maybe if I just didn't say anything, if we just got married and lived quietly, no one would ever have to know. But that was stupid and selfish. And I'm sorry." She paused, wiping her eyes. "I want you to know that everything I felt for you was real. Every laugh, every conversation, every moment we spent together, that was real. You made me feel like I mattered, like I was worth something, and I will be grateful for that for the rest of my life. I hope you find someone who deserves you, someone who can give you the life you deserve. And I hope someday you can forgive me." The video ended. Jonathan sat in silence, tears streaming down his face, and realized something that broke him even more than the betrayal. He still loved her. 6 months after the wedding that never was, Jonathan sold his company. He gave most of the money to charity, kept enough to live comfortably, and moved out of North Carolina. He didn't tell anyone where he was going. He just left. He ended up in a small town in Montana, working part-time at a bookstore, living in a cabin by a lake, and spending his days hiking and reading and trying to figure out who he was without the money, without the fame, without the weight of his family's expectations. And slowly, painfully, he started to heal. He thought about Emma every day, but he didn't search for her anymore. He figured if she wanted to be found, she would reach out. And if she didn't, he had to respect that. Then, 1 year after the collapse, he received a letter. It was postmarked from Oregon, no return address. Inside was a single page, handwritten. It said, "Jonathan, I heard you sold your company. I heard you left. I hope you're finding peace. I'm doing okay. I'm working at a library. I'm taking classes. I'm trying to be better. I don't expect anything from you. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I think about you every day. And I'm sorry. Always. Emma." Jonathan read the letter 3 times, and then he sat down and wrote back. He didn't send it right away. He spent days crafting the words, trying to figure out what he wanted to say, but eventually he did, and his letter said, "Emma, I don't hate you. I did for a while, but I don't anymore. What happened was horrible and complicated, and neither of us handled it the way we should have. But I don't think you're a bad person. I think you're someone who made a mistake. And I think I made one too. I should have been honest with you about who I was. I should have trusted you. And maybe if I had, none of this would have happened. I don't know if we'll ever see each other again. I don't know if we should. But I want you to know that I forgive you. And I hope you can forgive yourself. Jonathan. He sent the letter, and he waited. But no response came. Weeks passed, then months. And Jonathan accepted that maybe that was okay. Maybe some stories don't have happy endings. Maybe some people are meant to love each other from a distance. And maybe that was enough. So what do you think? Was Emma wrong for not telling Jonathan the truth from the beginning? Or was she just a woman who'd been rejected her whole life, desperate to hold on to the first person who ever made her feel loved? Was Jonathan wrong for falling so hard so fast that he didn't see the warning signs? Or was he just a man who wanted to believe in something real? And what about Jonathan's family, who knew the truth and chose to keep it hidden until it was too late? Who's really to blame here? Love is complicated. Family is messier. And sometimes, the people we hurt the most are the people we care about the most. If you were in Jonathan's position, could you forgive someone who lied to you about something that fundamental? And if you were in Emma's position, would you have had the courage to tell the truth, even if it meant losing everything? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know how you feel about this story. Would you have handled things differently? And if you made it this far, thank you for watching. If this story moved you, hit that like button, share it with someone who loves real emotional stories, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one, because trust me, the next story is even more intense. Until then, take care of yourselves, and remember, everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Be kind.